always choose truth.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to be?
This NATO force was sent to Afghanistan 13 years ago to seek out Al-Qaeda and destroy it. At its peak, NATO's International Security Assistance Force numbered 140,000, with soldiers drawn from 46 countries. Their mission evolved. With Al-Qaeda disappearing into the shadows, ISAF took on the Taliban, who had hosted Al-Qaeda leaders and their training camps before the attacks on 9/11. The cost of this war has been far-reaching. Almost 3,500 coalition soldiers have died and over 18,000 civilians killed. In monetary terms, the total in military and reconstruction budgets runs into hundreds of billions of dollars. A presidential election early this year, heralded as a sign of stability, saw President Hamid Karzai hand power to Ashraf Ghani. President Ghani's first major act was to sign the BSA, the bilateral security agreement that permits 12,000 US soldiers to stay after 2014. I went to Kabul to meet the one man tasked with finishing the job NATO started 13 years ago. Does General John Campbell believe the Afghan forces are up to the job of holding back the Taliban? And is Al-Qaeda now eradicated once and for all? What he has to say may surprise you as General John Campbell talks to Al Jazeera. General Campbell, thank you very much for joining us on Talk to Al Jazeera. Let's get to the nub of the whole question currently in Afghanistan and the drawdown. How ready are the Afghan forces to fill the vacuum that ISAF will leave behind?
Well, I mean, that's a multi-phase question, I think, there. So we've been here for 13 years. We've been working hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder with our Afghan partners, over 50 countries out of the coalition. I think that's incredible. I don't think we've ever had that many countries working in time of conflict together. We had to celebrate that piece. This is my third time in Afghanistan. I've been there many times over the last 13 years. I would tell you from my perspective as the commander of the International Security Assistance Forces that the Afghan forces continue to get better and better. I mean, they took over the lead in security in summer of 13. Summer of 14, they really had total lead. And so as we continue to transition and bring down the ISAF numbers, there are some areas that we'll continue to work with our Afghan partners. They still continue to need help in aviation, logistics, intelligence, sustainment, those type of things that are hard for any army around the world. The Afghans will continue to need some assistance from ISAF, and so we'll continue to do that. But I do believe on the security front, with the 352,000 Army and police and another 30,000 Afghan local police, that they're well positioned to take this fight on themselves, to provide security for the Afghan people. And the Afghan people, I think, believe this. The Afghan forces believe it. They got to continue to have the confidence, I believed. But I think next fighting season 15, that you'll see them standing on their own.
In Kunar province on the Pakistan border, the Afghan soldiers have no faith in their own fledgling air force.
Our only need is for air support for planes. Whenever we go on an operation, we need to be in contact with the air. When we face the enemy, we need air strikes. Because of the mountains, it's impossible to do the job in Kunar without it.
The Afghan Air Force is struggling to get off the ground, with far fewer aircraft than needed to back up ground forces. $500 million were spent on cargo planes, only for them to be deemed unsuitable for Afghan conditions and sold for scrap metal last year. Even the new Afghan president fears his air force isn't up to the job of evacuating the injured.
I cannot look at an injured policeman or intelligence officer or soldier in the eye to tell him that I cannot evacuate him.
One of the things that the new president, Ashraf Ghani, said, he said, I don't want to be a commander-in-chief when I look at my soldiers in the eye because I cannot evacuate them from the battlefield. As a commander yourself, how would you cope with having forces there that may not be able to be evacuated because they didn't have the right air force?
Yeah, we want to always put our soldiers, our police in a position they have the right resources to take care of any situation that may arise. The medevac, the CASEVAC, providing for wounded soldiers is very important to all of us. And we continue to work on their ability to be able to do that. They have many ways to do that. They can do that by ground. They can do that by fixed wing. They do have small aircraft. If they move a wounded person to a place that has a runway, they can do that. They have C-130s. They also have many Mi-17 helicopters that can do the same thing. We continue to train their pilots. We continue to train their nurses, their medics to be able to perform this care. So I think they continue to get better and better. Their casualties have gone up a little bit this year compared to last, but I think probably about 7%. Really, that went up the last 2 months, mostly on the police, and the police are out in these very deserted areas. And the Taliban and the insurgents see these local outposts, maybe 1 or 2 people without a lot of training, without a lot of the sophisticated weaponry. And those are the ones you hear about the Taliban say they overrun. When the Afghan security forces, the police, the army hear that, or they're near that, they overrun and take those back. So the Taliban can't hold terrain. They can't get to their objectives that they say they want to get to. But going back to the medevac piece, we continue to work very hard to train their medics. We continue to make sure they understand how the training procedures work with training their medics, how to evacuate. So I feel very comfortable they're getting much better there. They're not there yet, and we'll continue to assist where we can as they continue to move forward.
We've talked to some of the Afghan army out in the sticks, out in the FOBs and such the like, and there is a real fear that they have not yet got the backup of an air force, that if you're not in place and they're injured, they will get medevaced out. There is a real fear that they will be stuck there, and it sounds like the president holds the same fear.
Well, I think the 2 things that are very good is the president has taken on this role as commander-in-chief. You know, you didn't have that before. He's embraced not only the international community, but he's embraced the Afghan security forces. He said, hey, I take their welfare. You know, I'm responsible for their welfare. He's visited hospitals. He's visited their training sites. So he's going to do everything he can to, in fact, put pressure on me to make sure that we continue to help train the Afghans to get that capability. There's places today that we've had problems with medevac and CASVAC, even when we had 120,000 ISAF here. So, you know, we're going to continue to transition that. That is an area that we'll continue to focus on. It's not only about, you know, the equipment piece and the helicopters and the platforms, it's about training the people as well to be able to do that. And I think they'll continue to get better. Part of it really is the confidence and building the confidence so they will get out on their own and do those things. And that's something we have to work. But knowing that the president is behind them, that he's going to ask the very tough questions of his commanders. So I heard him do it the other day, where he had a unit that went out, it got hit by an IED, and it killed some, I think, police. He challenged that commander, said, why did you go on that road? You had intelligence that you should not have gone down there. Why are you making the same dumb mistake doing that? So the president has taken that on, and he will challenge his leadership. What I've told him many times and what he expresses to his commanders is the 2 things that will make a big difference in their confidence is having the right leadership and then holding people accountable. If they do those 2 things, I think it really changes the dynamics as you move forward.
Is there a sense that you think maybe they should have been considering the Air Force here before such a late stage? Or was there a sense, do you think, possibly among your predecessors, that almost by giving the Afghan army more of an Air Force, that it may well fall into enemy hands in some respects, that being a worry that, especially that not just Air Force but weaponry as well, could end up falling into enemy hands?
I don't think that was a concern for General Dunford or General Allen or General Petraeus or General McChrystal, any of my predecessors. I don't think that was in the calculus that it would fall into enemy hands.
But why isn't the Air Force further down the road than it is?
Well, I think, again, to train pilots, to train the crewmen, very technical piece. I think it takes a lot longer. You have to find the right people that can speak language, I think, English in this case, where they go get their training. So I think it's just been an evolution over time. And this has been going on for several years. The Air Force just didn't pop up, you know, yesterday. But we have a very sophisticated Air Force with their Special Mission Wing, and we'll continue to do that with their Air Force. I mean, I've been out and visited the Special Mission Wing, and what I would tell you is they're probably the most capable pilots, crewmen that I've seen in this part of the world. And the things that they can do, take a Mi-17, 3 or 4 of them, limited visibility at night, put them onto a very small landing zone, you know, on time, on target, deliver these special operating forces to have ISR, which they have the capability of, watching over that, for the special forces to get on the ground, pick up a device that they can look at full motion video coming from that ISR saying, go this way, go that way. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And they've done this routinely over the past several months. They have that capability. But that's a small piece, Special Mission Wing, that's a small piece of the total Air Force and of their security force structure. They'll continue to build that. And so I think they'll get better and better. But it takes time to grow pilots, crew chiefs, and also to get the helicopter. They got the last 3 helicopters in here within the last week, and we'll continue to build on that capability.
You've said before now that you are open to slowing down the drawdown if you decide you think that it needs to be slowed down. What would lead you to make that decision?
Well, I don't think I said I'm open to slow down. What I said was I have a responsibility as a commander coming on the ground to continually make assessments of what's happening on the ground. And then I owe my leadership my best military advice on how we should go further or how we should go forward. Is that quicker? Should I slow down? So I didn't specifically say slow down. I have to take a holistic look at that and take a look at all the factors that are out there. The situation changes. So we may have been going on a plan back in March and conditions and variables have changed on the ground, the enemy's changed or something else has changed here. I got to continually assess that situation and then make those recommendations to Central Command, to the Joint Staff, to the Secretary of Defense. And I'll continue to do that as we move forward.
And are there any specifics? I mean, you're talking about changing situation, but we know that attacks are still continuing. We know that there is still a threat. We know civilians are still being killed. When does it sort of bubble up to you thinking, okay, we need to re-look at this again?
Well, I think a lot of assumptions that we put in place was we were getting ready to move toward this resolute support piece have taken a little bit longer than we would have hoped to get into place. For instance, the signing of the BSA and the SOFA. So that took longer than where we wanted to get. Getting the government set. President Ghani, Chief Executive Officer Abdullah continue to make changes in leadership, continue to make cabinet changes. And so as we focus on the MOI, the MOD, NDS, those level of changes, as they make other changes in there, new people we haven't met or we haven't worked with yet, that's a variable I got to take into consideration and make sure we continue to move. So I continually assess that, and I'll make those judgment calls and pass it on to my leadership. But President Ghani has said himself that he believes now that you have an international community or an administration that really embraces the international community, he does want to slow down and take a hard look at this. So I'm taking a hard look at that with NATO. And then I'll provide recommendations to my chain of command as warranted.
The US currently finances the Afghan National Security Forces, so I think it's $4 billion, and I think that decision gets made on a yearly basis. How long will that, do you think, still be the commitment of the United States? I mean, are they looking at 3 years? Are they looking at 5 years? How long do you think that the US is going to have to say, we need to look after what's going on in Afghanistan?
Yeah, it's not only the United States. There's several nations that contribute to Afghanistan.
But the US takes up the lion's share.
The US has a large share of that, it does. And I think as we continue to look at that, what the United States will expect is that there are changes coming from the Afghan side. And I think probably in the past couple of years, it's been hard seeing if there were being changes made, particularly from President Karzai. And so that has changed people's thought. And quite frankly, when somebody keeps pounding and saying, hey, you're not welcome for all of the sacrifice that's happened here, the people in the United States, when they look at it, say, why do we continue to help Afghanistan when they're not appreciative? I would tell you that maybe President Karzai was that way. President Ghani, Dr. Abdullah are completely opposite. And the Afghan people.
There's been a real sea change.
Oh, absolutely. And the Afghan people I talk to, the military leadership I deal with, the people on the streets when you walk in there, they're very appreciative. They understand the commitment of not only the United States, but the other coalition countries. They understand that we've had brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers lost, paid the ultimate sacrifice. They tell me thank you every time that I see them. So, and the American people, a lot of times they don't see that because, quite frankly, all that the media passes is bad news, all right? So they don't see some of that goodness that we see there. So I don't know the number of years that we'll continue to fund. That'll be a congressional decision. What I will provide is my best military leadership on where the Afghan security forces are, and if we continue to fund at this level, here's what we can have. If we reduce at a certain level, here's what you can have. And if you stop, then here's what will be.
Looking at the wider stage, the US public is now seeing what's happening in Iraq and Syria. That is creating quite a lot of fear, not just in the US, but around the world. And that threat of ISIL is possibly more of a scare than the threat of the Taliban currently at the moment. What do you think the impact will have on Afghanistan as to really now the focus is shifting to a different part of this region?
Yeah, I think people take a look at what's happened with Iraq, and when the coalition left in 2011 and said, hey, look where we are today, don't let that happen to Afghanistan. What I would tell you is they're two different things. There are some similarities, but really it is different. Here in 2014, going into 2015, you have a government that wants you here. The day after President Ghani did his inauguration, he signed the BSA, he signed the SOFA, so they absolutely want this commitment. That's not what we had in Iraq. You saw, quite frankly, after 2011 that the security forces fractured a little bit. Prime Minister Maliki put some leadership practices in there that caused ethnic tension and caused a fraction. President Ghani is not going to do that. In fact, if you take a look at the elections, the Afghan security forces did not fracture along those ethnic lines. People said they would. And through the election, through the second election piece, they hung together. And there was a lot of fear out there that they would come apart. And everything that I saw, they did not.
The fact that you are leaving a small presence, any kind of presence, is obviously aggravated certain sectors. Certainly Iran is not happy that any presence is getting left behind. But there's been repercussions with the Taliban, who have now said this means that there will be no sense of a peace process. This means we will not be taking part in any kind of political solution now. That's a repercussion that will have huge ramifications, really, because before there was a sense of a peace process. There's no way around that, though.
Well, I look at it differently. I think that President Ghani in his inauguration speech said, hey, look, Taliban, what are you doing? You have a government, a national unity government now. Over 85% of the people said, we're together. So who are you fighting? You're attacking other Afghans. Why are you doing this? If you want to be part of this process, you want peace, you need to lay your weapons down. You need to become part of the process. So, to the Taliban, my message would be is that the BSA and the SOFA means that the coalition will continue to be here. So if you thought that we were leaving and that now you can come and continue to fight, because I think that they weren't serious about the peace process anyway. All right. And so with the BSA, what's that shown them is, hey, we're shoulder by shoulder with our Afghan partners. All right. And so the other thing, and President Ghani talked about this the other day, there was a rocket that landed on a detention facility that injured over 30 of the detainees. And that was Taliban attacking their own Taliban. In fact, one of them was killed. What's the deal? All right. So, they got to figure out what their message here. And their leadership is disjointed. Their leadership, where are they at? The regular Taliban ought to ask themselves, hey, where's my leadership? It's in Pakistan. It's in other places in sanctuary. It's not fighting. Are they really here? Are they really serious about what their goals are? I don't think so.
But they do use any single foreign fighter on the ground in Afghanistan as a recruitment.
They do, but 95% of the civilians that are killed in Afghanistan are caused by the insurgent. 95%. What do they say about that? They said, I saw a report where they said they were sorry that they attacked their own guys in the detention facility. Are they sorry that 90% of the civilian casualties that in 2014 continue to rise, they've caused? Have they said they're sorry about that? So, that's how you got to challenge them, all right? And I think if you challenge the individual Taliban and say, look what you're doing, why are you killing other Afghans here? So I don't buy that there's a U.S. or a coalition person staying here, and that's why they got to continue this fight.
What's the latest intelligence as to where their finance is coming from?
Well, they get a lot of finances, I think, through other countries. I don't want to go through that in that kind of detail here because we continue to look for those type of things and see what we can do to help defray that. There's been a lot of reports lately on the poppies and the narcotics piece. They continue to get...
Which is at a record level at the moment, the opium production here.
Well, I read that the other day in one of the reports that continues to increase over the years.
Has that been a failure of the attempts of the various NGOs and ISAF to try and persuade people not to grow poppies anymore, to try and get them into other crops?
Yeah, I tell you the truth, I haven't looked at that hard since I've been here. I've been focused on looking in the future and looking at resident support, not looking back at what happened. There are things that we can look at to continue to get lessons learned. I look at that in terms of what I can do to get the Afghan security forces better. I don't look at the poppy cultivation piece as one that...
But the cash goes to the Taliban, so...
Yeah, I think some of that does. And if you look at the history of this over years and years, it's gone up and down, up and down. And again, I think President Karzai did some things that maybe enabled that. And I think President Ghani is going to take a hard look at this and say, make some leadership changes, some things that will take that away.
13 years ago, the NATO operation came in to get rid of al-Qaeda. What sense of al-Qaeda is there still in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I think there continues to be an al-Qaeda presence here. I do think that there's been a continued fight against that over the last 13 years. There's been a lot of damage on some of the senior leadership on some of the fighters. There continues to be some al-Qaeda presence in Afghanistan. There's also other insurgent groups that continue to facilitate al-Qaeda. And so I think we still have a mission to continue, because their mission of going outside of Afghanistan to attack Europe, to attack the United States, is still there. You know, I tell people one of the big measures of success is that you have men and women that are committed to coming over here to sacrifice, and you haven't had another big 9/11. You haven't had another Madrid. You haven't had another attack in London. So I think it's a good thing that we continue to keep that pressure on. But as we move forward, we got to take a holistic look and make sure that we continue to build that capability within Afghanistan and the neighboring countries for this counterterrorism threat that Prime Minister Cameron, quite frankly, said several weeks ago in a speech that this is a generational problem that we're going to have. So we have a lot of pressure on al-Qaeda, and I do believe if you take that pressure off, then over time that will regenerate. So we got to continue to attack that and keep the pressure on.
Was the mission to come and eradicate al-Qaeda from Afghanistan an impossible mission?
I don't know. I'm not going to speak of it as an impossible mission. That's 13 years ago. I think the mission over time has evolved. I think that we've continued to take a hard look at not only al-Qaeda but other insurgents groups that facilitate them. If you're sitting in the United States, if you're sitting in England today, you don't worry about al-Qaeda. You don't worry about some of those attacks. In the United States, the biggest distraction it has is if you go to the airport and you have to go through some of the lines that have been caused that we didn't have prior to 9/11. That's a good thing that our families don't worry about that. But again, you have people all over the world, but concentrating in certain places that want to go out and do harm to innocent civilians. And so we have to deal with that. That's something that's going to be around for years and years, and it's going to take the international community to continue to take pressure, not something just the United States can do, not something just Afghanistan can do, but the international community. So this global problem that we have, this is going to take a global response. And you're seeing that in Syria and Iraq and Yemen, Somalia, all over the world. And I think we're going to have to continue to stay on that.
A large number of ISAF fighters have lost their lives here. That's one hell of a commitment for Afghanistan.
Yeah, I think, my message would be the Afghan people understand that sacrifice. Again, I told you earlier that they come up to me now and say, hey, thank you for the sacrifice. We've known you've lost men and women over the years. And, my message, I think, is for the men and women of all the countries that have lost loved ones here, that their sacrifice has not been in vain, and that they'll see that Afghanistan understands that and they want to do better by them. And so I truly believe that the sacrifice of our men and women over the last 13 years will not be in vain, and that we can never, ever forget that sacrifice, whatever country you're from, and that we can never forget the sacrifice of the families that have provided us the opportunity, that put up with us being soldiers to come over here, that do the things that mom and dads have to do by themselves with the kids. Every Sunday, earlier today, we meet 11:45 and we have a memorial service every Sunday. And we not only talk about the coalition that we've lost, but we also talk about the Afghan martyrs and remember their sacrifice. And so again, we can never forget the Afghan or the coalition sacrifice or their families. And I do thank them very much for many of them paying the ultimate sacrifice.
How difficult is it for you in your stage in your career to come into a country that is on a drawdown, that is kind of doing a training mission, not a fighting mission, that's so political in many respects, and it sort of changed the way, I guess, that a fighting man would operate here? How difficult is it, as I say, at this stage in your career, to take on that role?
Are you saying I'm old or what?
No, I'm saying you're the experience.
Very experienced. Wow. Look, I've been in the Army for 35 years. This is my third time in Afghanistan. I spent a very long time in Iraq as well. This is what soldiers do. And so I have no problem coming over to Afghanistan. My son has been here twice. He's a sergeant in the Army. This is for the men and women that have come here, not only from the United States, but from all the countries, are very dedicated. They're passionate about this. They want to continue to do what they can to help Afghanistan. I think as you look around, what the ISAF and what the coalition has done over the last 13 years provide hope to the Afghan people. And as we move into resolute support, that mission continues to change, and it will over time. President Obama said we won't be in combat operations. We'll continue to do things to help our Afghan partners at a different level. And so I have no issue coming, when they said, hey, you're going to go stay in Washington, D.C. or come to Afghanistan, that wasn't a hard choice.
Which do you prefer?
Well, I absolutely prefer working with our Afghan partners here today and the leadership that we have and continue to help them build their capacity.
So it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.